So my name is Tesfamariam. I came from the U.S. I work at Stanford University. This is the conference, international conference on Eritrean studies. This is the second time. The first one was held in 2016. I was also here. This time in 2025. I also came to present one, which is the National Public. The title is the National Public Diplomacy, its activities, lessons learned, and its future plan from 21 to 24. So in PG, the aim is to, first of all, just brief context, to have a context. The first Eritrean came to the United States in 1924. This is documented, not hearsay or family story, whatever. We know exactly when he came, what's the name of the ship, the name of the record of the ship, the person, and also where he lived in the 1940s, for example, through the U.S. Census and stuff like that. So basically what we're saying is Eritrean Americans have been in the U.S. for 100 years in 2024. So what do we have to show for within that 100 years? I mean, there are a lot of things that were done. National public diplomacy is not new. Before independence, there were a lot of activities to send to the liberated zone and stuff like that. So all of that was done. So it's nothing new what we're doing. But what we're doing now is a little bit different because we want to make culture in a bigger sense, sports, food, music, clothing, literature, all of that is under a lazy way of saying it, under culture, using that as a strategy, main center, and then promote Eritrean soft power. That's what it is. But we have to be careful so that soft power or that public diplomacy should not be construed as propaganda, because propaganda in soft power, depending on who is listening, could be interpreted that way. So the challenge for public diplomacy participants or who work, volunteer, all of us are volunteer workers. So we need to be careful how we present Eritrea to Americans. So we do that through culture, and then at the same time not to make it into look something different other than public diplomacy. So that's making that central. We were able to do a lot of accomplishment. So we are telling our own story. We're creating a magazine, online magazine and print magazine every 3 months. So I think we've published almost 13 of them with 600 pages of history. So we start with archaeology because that's the comparative advantage we have. And then, wildlife and all that. And then young people are joining and contributing, writing to that. And then we have a newsletter monthly. That's about 33, 34 issues. That's about 300 pages. So 16 pages per each newsletter. So a total of, since we started basically mid-March 2021, we've published over 15,000 pages. About 1,000 pages. So then we created a brand, and the brand, we need to tell. So one of the things is that we have to tell our own story. Nobody's going to come to you and ask you what you're doing. So we have to go and tell our story. So by telling our story, we have to be proactive. So the magazine is one of them. Website, there were only 2 websites in the U.S., in 2 cities, but now 20 cities, because there are over 53 cities that the Eritreans reside in the U.S. So we need to, the second, third generation were born in Eritrea now, in the U.S. Are some of them lawyers, judges, scientists, and all that. So we need to harness all that power, and then because otherwise, if it's diluted, everybody's doing whatever different things, then we don't have that collective power. So because since this is our collective memory, our collective history, so I think we need to be able to do that. So the challenge is that, but we have to keep continuing doing it. And then eventually, if we can institutionalize that and have our kids or grandkids, whatever, become mayors and governors and stuff like that, since they are born, and this is a third, fourth generation since the first one came. So I think that's our measurement, and what the matrix would be when an Eritrean start talking about Eritrea. That's a good measurement that it has transformed from public diplomacy to non-propaganda, because otherwise it would be proper. But things like Binyam Girmay having that's, all cyclists. It's not one person. If it was only Danil Taklahaymanot and nobody else, then it would have been different. But since we have a whole lot of cyclists winning different things, that's in cycling, Eritrea has put its signature. So we need to put Eritrea's signature in science, technology, literature, law, fashion, music, and all that. So that could be done through public diplomacy and understanding what, and strategizing and putting culture as a strategy at the center of public diplomacy. I would say that would be a success.
I'm Professor of Architecture and Global Modernities at the Bartlett School of Architecture, which is in University College London. And the presentation that I gave was a development on the work that I've been doing with the Asmara Heritage Project over the last 15 years or so. And the title of it the paper itself was looking at decentering modern heritage and the way that Asmara has been pioneering in that pursuit over the last 15 or 20 years. And the feedback I've had has been very positive. It's been a pleasure, obviously, to be at this conference. It's the third time I've been to this conference. I was here in 2001, 2016, and again this year. And so the presentations that we gave in our panel were all from the Asmara Heritage Project, different aspects of the way that Asmara has been researched, has been prepared for UNESCO, and then was successfully inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And what I was trying to do was to develop the thesis, the argument that we've been presenting both to UNESCO but also more widely, globally, as to how Asmara has played this leading role in trying to critique the way that modern heritage is often portrayed as a European phenomenon from a European perspective. And Asmara is an Eritrean city and has very distinct Eritrean characteristics. So it's a useful example, I think, for other countries outside of Europe to see how modern heritage contains these intrinsic indigenous localized characteristics and how valuable they are. I mean, Asmara is it's pioneering internationally for the reasons I've described, and it's a useful example in, as I said, challenging the Eurocentric perspective of modern heritage, but it's also pioneering, I think, within Eritrea. I mean, it was Africa's first modern heritage site, and it's Eritrea's first UNESCO World Heritage site. So there are obviously precedents that now can be considered for future World Heritage sites within Eritrea. Karen is an extremely beautiful city, which is, I know they're undergoing their own research now to consider nomination for UNESCO, and they should be pursued because it's important to understand what are the attributes, what are the characteristics of a city that make it or have outstanding value to humanity. So Karen would need to determine what those are and then present their case to UNESCO, which would be a very interesting one. I think also Massawa would be a wonderful opportunity. Of course, Massawa has faced years of relative underdevelopment and needs some sort of economic development, and that's a big question over conserving Massawa. What do you conserve? What do you preserve? What do you hope to develop? What is the future of a place like Massawa? But as a city that represents quite complex regional and even global trade routes, Massawa, I think, has a fascinating history, which again needs to be better researched and more understood and potentially presented for UNESCO. I would also add, though, it's not just the cities. I think the archaeological discoveries that they're making in Adulis and the way in which more understanding of what occurred on the coastal areas of Eritrea in around Adulis and their interactions with the hinterland and more globally with the trade routes that they were connected with stand a very strong chance of UNESCO World Heritage listing. And again, it just requires that team to not only do the research that they're doing, as we were doing in Asmara 10, 20 years ago, but then reformulating that for UNESCO. And I think that would stand a very strong chance.
There is anything you'd like to add?
Well, I suppose in the context of Adulis, also the way it connects to other archaeological and built heritage sites like Kwahaito, and that for me is particularly interesting because the techniques that were used to construct the buildings that we're now finding in Adulis and to some extent in the highlands, they are also reflected through the modernist heritage in Asmara, and I think that's one of the strongest things that makes Asmara a heritage site unique to its place, that they are intrinsically intrinsically Eritrean. The materials, the local skills, the labor, the knowledge. You can see it going back 2,000 and more years. And it's not just modernist in a architectural or colonial sense. It's intrinsically Eritrean in a very sort of in a strong sense of deep time, going back millennia. So the more we learn about the coast and Adulis, the more we understand about the modern heritage too.
So this panel discussion was to honor Tesfai, who's the national treasure of this country. He's a good writer. I mean, he covers a whole lot of. He's a good lawyer. So he was a fighter. He left. He was in the U.S. And then he left his PhD studies to come and join the liberation movement here. And then, so he's a playwright, an author, a novelist, historian, lawyer, all of this. So, the theme was that narrating history through public intellectuals. So there were two presenters, Dr. Taj, Professor Taj, talked about some of his books, mentioned in a very poetic, replied in a very poetic way, and my role was that to summarize the trilogy, which is the three different books that he has written on the political history of Eritrea from 1941 to 1961. Covers over 1,900 pages. I mean, it's hard to report on 1,963 pages in 25 minutes. But luckily, Professor Gebrehiyot had written about the trilogy, maybe about 10, 15 pages a couple of years ago. So I went through it and basically agreeing with most of the things he said there. So, but he had recommendations and comments at the end. So I started with that. Some of the comments that he had written was that it should be translated into English, so which Alam Seged is doing. It was supposed to be published in November last year, but now I think it will be available this month. So that would, the comment that Professor Gebrehiyot had mentioned will be, and then is translated into other Eritrean languages. In Arabic it's translated, and Tigray is translated. So, and then he was hoping that a lot of Eritreans read his books. Now, non-Eritreans, Eritrean kids who are outside, who don't read Tigrinya, could be available to them in English. So, because he wrote it himself in Tigrinya and also 3 volumes in Tigrinya, and probably combined all the 3 volumes into 1 volume in English, it's a big task. So I think we need to honor him for all the works that he did and continue to do. So that's why we're here.
My name is Serena Massa. I'm working in Eritrea since 12 years. I'm the scientific coordinator and director and co-director of Adulis project, together with the Commission of Culture and Sports. The project was launched by the Eritrean government 12 years ago, and the archaeological site of Adulis is every year revealing the groundbreaking nature of this archaeological site regarding broad themes like the birth of urban civilization in the Horn of Africa. It is completely out-reversing the story, because it has been long believed that from the highland came the civilization. But we have the proof in Adulis that a settlement existed there in the 2nd millennium BC, with 3 very, very close contacts with Egypt. It was the land of Punt, where Egypt searched for exotic goods, and it was a commercial hub since there. So it is really very, very important, but still not well known, and we are doing our best to make these novelties known. These novelties are based on archaeological facts, so they can be demonstrated scientifically. and this is the most important part of our work. So the reaction was really a very, very close interest, much interest, but also some resistance, because the tradition of the study is from an Eurocentric and also Ethiopic point of view. But we are demonstrating the contrary. The questions were really about the relationship between Adulis and Aksum. So it is traditionally believed that Adulis is the port of Aksum. That means mostly between the 3rd and 7th century AD. Our archaeological excavation demonstrated that Adulis exists long before Aksum. So this has to be really understood and viewed in a larger vision. So it is a schematic representation of history that prevailed, and one of the questions from the public was just about this. In my presentation, I demonstrated with archaeological proofs that Adulis exists long before Aksum, and in the public one asked me, you didn't mention Aksum. Of course, there are hundreds of books on this theme, but really it is really a short period of Adulis story. In the Horn of Africa, civilization started from the sea, not from the highland, and this is a very groundbreaking novelty. And about the conference, I'm really honored to be here. It is an honor to be in this country because the way of share the working and share ethic vision about work, I think it deserves our esteem, our profound esteem.
My name is Tej Dhar. I am a professor in the Chicago School of Liberal Arts, Shulani University, India. And I came here to present a paper on Alamsagar Tesfamariam, which is the writer as a historical subject. The burden of the paper is to show how Alamsagar can be seen in the larger context of global post-colonial literature. That is why, for a perspective, I chose to talk about two distinguished Indian novelists, Raja Rao and Mulkraj Anand. Then I also made a mention of Chinua Achebe and Gugi Wantiango. And the argument that I presented was that they were writers who witnessed the colonial times, and they were able to convince the people that they were strong enough to face the colonizer, to resist them, and also to know the truth about themselves. But Alamsagar went a step further, which is that he cast himself in a role which was demanded by the times, and for which I think the most ideal example we have is of Frantz Fanon, because Fanon was a doctor by training, and he was in Algeria, and when he came to see how the Algerians were fighting for their liberation, he joined them. Unfortunately, because of his sickness, he had to go to the US, where he passed away soon after. But before dying, he wrote a letter to his friend telling him that if he had known that his death was so near, he would have stayed back and fought. And that's what Alamsagar did. He had a flourishing career in the United States. He could become a big researcher, but he gave up. He came and joined the warriors in Sahel, and he remained there till the country became independent in 1991. And the burden of this was to show that the kind of writing that he produced while he was there truly represents the Eritrean character, how the Eritreans thought of themselves, not as individuals, but as beings of a nation which was in the making, and how they thought that fighting the enemy is the only thing that matters in their lives. And then I explained everything in terms of how he wrote his stories, what kind of messages are there, how he wrote his short essays, what kind of message do they convey, and also about the plays that he wrote, which have a very strong post-colonial content in them. And At the end of the presentation, there were questions, not many, but I think there were more of appreciation for saying the things about him which nobody here had said before.
My name is Dr. Tsagay Medina. I'm from the Archaeological Heritage Research Branch from the Commission of Culture and Sports. And this conference 2025, together with my co-authors, Professor Lorenzo Ruc and Professor Benvenido Martinez Navarro, we presented the 30 years archaeological and paleontological research from the Danakil depression of Eritrea. In this presentation, we presented the activities, the results of the last exhaustive research works of the prehistory of the basin. Eritrea have been known for this kind of results from the late 1994, and the research work have been very important in Eastern Africa and in the world, with the finding of the 1 million cranium of human ancestor and other stone tools and mammals, some of them extinct, some of them with their descendants until the present times. And the project is running, is going, and these are two sisterly projects there. One is the Buya project, where we are engaging in this project from 1994, and the other sisterly project, which is much more younger, is the Ngalila Ramut projects. We are working on this project with our partners from Spain, and these two projects are in a separate basin, but the information they are earning is very, very important, not in terms of this nation and the region, but at international standards. Research are going, and the results are really offering a lot of information in the paleoanthropological research.